Welcome to episode 6 of the Java Basics series, where we'll go over how to break our code down into small, manageable blocks of code that we can reuse, making use of methods. So here we have a sample project that takes the prices of 3 different items from the grocery store and calculates the tax for each item. So all 3 of these items, milk, butter, and cabbage, they start with defining a price for the item, then they calculate the tax by multiplying it by 0.08, the tax rate, and then they print out the tax. And so now if we run the code, you can see it prints out these values. But if the tax rate were to suddenly change, for example, to maybe 10% or 0.1 in decimal form, we'd have to change it everywhere throughout the code. And so when you have many dozens of items that you have to do this with, it becomes very tedious changing a detail like the tax rate. So that's why we need methods in order to simplify this process. So now let's go over what a method is. So as an analogy, a method can basically be thought of as an appliance in your house. You install it just once, so that means a method in the code base is only there one time, not multiple times like how we had it before in the tax calculation program. And so we can provide it with ingredients, the appliance, or parameters as they're formally called in Java. And the appliance or method does some work behind the scenes and it outputs something new, which in Java, that output would be a return value. So methods reduce repetition by letting you perform the same code with different input. So in the case of our tax calculation program, we could create a tax calculator function or method which accepts the price of an item from the grocery store and a tax rate. So that way we could call the method multiple times with different food item prices and different tax rates. So now let's create a sample method for ourselves so that we can see how it works. So in order to do so, we can go into this lesson 6 class before the main method starts. And then to start creating a method, we can type public static, the same thing as what's before our main method here. So this public static just allows this main method to actually see the method so that we can use it when running our code. However, this public static is not the most important thing in the method declaration because there are other things that we need to include too. And so after the public static, we have to include the data type that we want to return, that we want the method to return. So in this case, let's say we're just creating a method that adds two numbers together, adds two integers together. So that means the result would be an int. And then we could name the method add integers, and then the name of the method comes after the data type, and then after the name of the method, put a pair of parentheses, and inside those parentheses, what we want to do is add the parameters that we want our function or method to take in, separated by commas. So this is the input here. So we want to input two numbers into this add integers function. Two integers, or int specifically. So we can create an int called num1, that's the first number, and then add a comma specifying a second parameter, and then int num2, which is the second number. And so after these parentheses, we can add some curly braces, and inside these curly braces are the actual calculations that'll be made. So in this case, to add two integers, we would need to find the sum of them. So we can create a new variable called sum, and then set it equal to the first number plus the second number. And then you can see it says this method must return a result of type int. And so that means we actually need to return a value. In this case, the value that we want to return is sum. So we can type in the keyword return and then type in the value which we want to return. So in this case, it's sum, so we can just type return sum like this. So from here, we can add a print statement to test out our method. So inside our print statement, we can see when we type in the name of our method, it appears in the autocomplete here. So we can press tab, and then we have to supply it with integers. So let's say 5 and 10. So after running this code, this method call should resolve to 15 if we wrote everything correctly. So now you can see 15 is outputted in the console, which is exactly the output that we expected. We can also test it with different numbers. So, for example, copy and paste this line a couple times. We can do 1 and 3, that should output 4. And then maybe 2 and 7, that should give 9. So now we know that it works with different inputs as well. So now what if we just want to print out something inside this function and we don't actually want to return anything? So in that case, we can use the void keyword here as the data type. And so void basically means that this greeting method here won't return anything. So storing its output would be useless because it doesn't have any output. So that means we can just use the method by calling it. And so we can pass in a name. And so it gives us the greeting. So because the data type here is void, it also means it doesn't need a return statement. But if you're going to be returning something, make sure this data type here isn't void. Make sure it matches exactly what you're returning. So now for the challenge to cap episode 6 off, we want to build two separate methods. Firstly, calculate tip, which will return a 15% tip on a specific bill amount you pass into it, and is even, which will return true if the integer passed into it is even and false otherwise. If you need help with creating is even, then you can use the modulo operator percentage, and then 2. So the number variable, and then %2, and this will return the remainder when the variable num is divided by 2. And so once you're done creating both of those methods, call them in main and test them with different inputs, and neatly print out both the inputs you tested and the outputs that the methods gave you. Thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and be on the lookout for episode 7, where we'll be learning about Java's object-oriented programming capabilities for the first time.